Shalom, guys. Welcome back to another episode here at YASHAV Ministries. So, we're going to open up a little differently today. Little thing that we're going to try out. See what you guys think. Comment down below. So, I looked up some jokes. So, yes, I looked up some Bible jokes, culture, cheesy jokes. See what you guys think. Just let me know. All right. First one says, who is the smartest man in the Bible? The answer is Abraham. You know why? Because he knew a lot. That's a good one. All right. I'm going to ask you this one, and then at the end, we'll answer it. So keep it in mind. It says, why didn't they play cards on the ark? Keep that in mind. So, like I would say,
smash that like button and subscribe.
So, this week's Torah portion is Metzora. Before we get started, let's do the Torah blessing. Baruch Adonai Haorah, Baruch Adonai Haorah le'olam ba'eh, Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim, benatan lanu et torato, Baruch Adonai noten haTorah. Bless Adonai who is blessed. Bless Adonai who is blessed now and forever. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who has chosen us from among the peoples and has given us the Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, who gives the Torah. Amen. So last week we spoke about a woman that gives birth, and it also talks about the zarat, right? The leprosy, skin scale disease, or infection. There is what is the chronic leprosy, which is an illness that is in the skin itself. And so Adonai is teaching them how to treat this. And also there is a leprosy that is not profound or deep in the skin, but more in the surface. And so the distinctions are made between these. One's brought and burn and boils come out, skin falls off. Others become white and then spread through the whole body. And so chapter 13 describes each of them, how it could happen to clothes, homes, and the ways to treat these biblically based on Adonai's order and structure. That way they are not distracted by culturally what is believed mythically and to an extent culturally around them. Okay, so before we get started with the reading, we're gonna follow some pointers, read some things, and then I'll let you be free. So like I said, this week's Torah portion is Metzora, Leviticus 14 verse 1 through chapter 15 verse 33. The Haftarah portion of the prophet's portion is 2 Kings chapter 7 verse 3 to 20, and the Brit Hadashah is Matthew chapter 23 verse 16 through Matthew chapter 24 verse 2 or chapter 30 verse 3. And so the base of what is commonly expressed in these Torah portions are purity, ritually, and moral. Okay, and so when it comes to plagues or diseases, the foundation that is established is based on Exodus chapter 15 verse 26, when it says, if you give earnest and heed to the voice of the Lord your Elohim, and do what is right in his sight, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the disease on you which I have put on the Egyptians, for I, the Lord, am your healer. And so here Adonai is telling the people that he will protect them from anything that is a disease or the plagues that were seen in Egypt. And understand that these plagues were manifestations of not only the gods, but also of ideas, things that they feared. And Adonai himself demonstrated it to Egypt and to the people that he is the controller of these things, that it is not other entities or the diseases or plagues themselves. It is him. And so dictated by your moral actions and how you live according to what Adonai commands, you will not transgress, and he will not let those things come upon you. The protection is based on your consistency, faithfulness, and dedication to Adonai. Metzora is the fifth Torah portion in the book of Leviticus or Vayikra. This parashat deals with ritual impurity. It addresses cleansing from skin disease, za'arat, houses, an erupted plague, male genital discharge, and menstruation. The overview of leprosy has tormented humans throughout record history. The earliest possible account of it, the disease itself, that many scholars believe is leprosy. It appears in Egyptian papyrus documents written in around 1550 BC. Around 600 BC, Indian writing describe a disease that resembles leprosy. In Europe, leprosy first appeared in records of ancient Greece after the army of Alexander the Great came back from India, and then in Rome in 62 BC, coinciding with the return of Pompey's troops from Asia Minor. And in India, this is something that is still true to this day. And the way that leprosy in this time is treated is kind of how it was treated back then: separation, distance, exile. Okay, now throughout its history, leprosy has been feared and misunderstood for a long time. Leprosy was thought to be a hereditary disease, a curse, or a punishment from God before and even after the discovery of its biological causes. Leprosy in patients were stigmatized and shunned. For example, in Europe during the Middle Ages, leprosy sufferers had to wear special clothing, ring bells to warn others that they were close, and even walk on particular side of the road, depending on the direction of the wind. Even in modern times, leprosy treatment has often occurred in separate hospitals and live in colonies. Leprosy has been so prevalent in various areas and certain times throughout history that is and has inspired artwork and influence in other cultural practices. Leviticus 13 it gives us the first steps of how to diagnose leprosy. And remember, it gives two different leprosies, and we're not going to read the whole thing, right? We're going to read certain things, especially the main couple verses, because it describes to an extent two different reactions to this, right? So it says, when a man has the skin on his body, a swelling or a scab or a bright spot, and it becomes an infection of leprosy on the skin of his body, then he shall be brought to Aaron and the priest, or to one of his sons, the priest. The priest shall look at the mark on the skin and the body, and if the hair in the infection has turned white, and the infection appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it is an infection of leprosy. When the priest has looked at him, he shall pronounce him unclean. Now, 7 days. But if the bright spot is white and the skin of his body, and it does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and the hair it has not turned white, then the priest shall isolate him who has the infection for 7 days. So here is where it gets tricky, right? Because the evidence in the first couple of verses is that it is deep enough in the skin to where it affects the hairs, and it is an identification of the disease of leprosy skin wise. But now it is in the surface, not penetrating, and so it has to be examined. So he waits 7 days. The priest shall look at him on the seventh day, and if in his eyes the infection has not changed and the infection has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall isolate him for 7 more days. The priest shall look at him again on the seventh day, and if the affliction has faded and the mark has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. Now, if the scab spreads further on the skin after he has shown himself to the priest for his cleansing, he shall appear again to the priest. The priest shall look, and if the scab has appeared on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean, and it is leprosy. So now there's two distinctions to this, right? So deep in the skin, surface, examines at least 14 days, 7 to 14 days. If it goes away, you're clean. But if it comes back, it is leprosy. But why does it come back? Okay. Now, we jump to verse 44, 45, 46, and it says, as the leper who has the infection, his clothes shall be torn, and his head shall be uncovered, and he shall cover his mustache and cry, unclean, unclean. And he shall remain unclean all the days during which he has the infection. He is unclean. He shall live alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. Okay, now, interesting. Remember, this skin disease, remember, other nations might completely and early identify it with an affliction from God or a curse from God, and so, or a family curse that they inherited, and it can be a skin disease that can be treated, maintained, or diagnosed by the chosen priest that is appointed in the tabernacle and eventually in the temple. But the interesting part about the leprosy is that it's also identified with death, lashon hara, as we will read, and other moral sins inward that reflect in this mark that which you're hiding. Okay, and so it's not necessarily God afflicting on the body of the person. It's mostly the person itself afflicting, and the body itself having a reaction, or God reflecting a visible representation of the sin, and God giving a visual representation of the sin. So the Torah spends an amount of time detailing the condition called leprosy. It tells us about people's leprosy, but also about leprosy in beards, fabrics, and houses, like in Leviticus 13 through verse 18 through 59. Leprosy in the Bible seems to relate not only to the loathsome disease by that name, but also to all sorts of corruption and decay. The term seems to be used to refer to advance of death and corruption in matter. Leprosy is also associated with one of the most important sins in the Bible, the one called lashon hara, which literally means the evil tongue. The term refers to gossip, slander, because after slandering Moses, her brother, and divinely appointed leader of Israel, Miriam was afflicted by this leprosy. And it's interesting because when you read Numbers 12, you see that it says that she looked white as if she was dead. And so this sin was manifested on her due to her actions behind Moses' back and against him of whom was chosen. Okay, it says leprosy and the state of the ritual impurity are irrelevant today because they technically only relate to the temple in Jerusalem, which does not exist at this present time, of course. Now, it's interesting because there is references to a leprous Messiah, and also connections to that in the prophets. And says the Talmud tells of one called the leper Messiah. It presents a supposed discourse between the great Rabbi Joshua ben Levi and the prophet Elijah. The rabbi asks, when will the Messiah come? And by what sign may I recognize him? Elijah tells the rabbi to go to the gate of the city where he will find the Messiah, interestingly, sitting among the poor lepers. The Messiah, says the prophet, sits bandaging his leprous sores one at a time, unlike the rest of the sufferers who bandage them all at once. And he asks why. And he says, because he might be needed at any time, it will not want to be delayed. And this is in Sanhedrin 98:8. One of the names of the coming Messiah in the Talmud is the leopard scholar, right? Now, somewhere you can see hints of this is in Isaiah chapter 53. And it says, the suffering servant who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed. For he grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of the parched ground. He has no stately form or majesty that he should look upon him, nor appearance that we shall be attached to him. He was despised and forsaken of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and like one from whom men hide their face, he was despised, and we did not esteem him. Surely our griefs he himself bore, and our sorrows he carried. Yet we ourselves esteemed him and stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was pierced through for our transgression. He was cursed for our iniquities. The chastising for our well-being fell upon him, and by his scourging we are healed. All of us like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has tuned to his own way, but the Lord has caused them, the iniquity of us all, to fall on him. He was oppressed and he was afflicted. And so these are referenced to that Messiah, the leper's Messiah, that suffering servant that is to come. And it's interesting, right? Because it connects it with the leper and how that leper is unclean and is distanced after being examined and being called or declared unclean by that priest. And he had to go through a process of purification after being clean. And if he was unclean, then he would be rejected or stayed outside the camp. And remember, in Yeshua's time, this was very important, and they put highly above the ritual purity before moral. So a leper in Yeshua's time was something that would never be touched. But chapter 8 in Matthew says the following: when Jesus came down from the mountain, a large crowd followed him, and the leper came to him, and he bowed down before him and said, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. And Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. Immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus said to him, see that you tell no one, but go and show yourself to the priest and present the offering that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. And it's interesting because Jesus himself tells this leper that's cleansed by Yeshua, by Jesus, to go fulfill that which was established by Moses. And in reality, it wasn't established by Moses. It was established by God himself. And we can read that in this week's Torah portion in chapter 14. And we're going to read the first couple of verses. And it says, Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, This shall be the law of the leper in the day of his cleansing. Now he shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall go out to the outside of the camp. Thus the priest shall look, and if the infection of the leper has been healed, the priest shall give orders to take 2 live clean birds and cedar wood, and scarlet string, and hyssop for the one who is to be cleansed. The priest shall also go and give orders to slay the one bird in an earthenware vessel over running water. As for the live bird, he shall take it together with the cedar wood and the scarlet string and the hyssop, and shall dip them on the live bird in the blood of the bird that was slain over the running water. He shall then sprinkle 7 times the one who is to be cleansed from the leprosy, and shall pronounce him clean, and shall let the live bird go free over the one field. The one to be cleansed shall then wash his clothes and shave off all his hair and bathe in water and be clean. Now afterwards he may enter the camp, but he shall stay outside his tent for 7 days. And it will be on the 7th day that he shall shave off all his hair. He shall shave his head and his beard and his eyebrows and even all his hair. And he shall then wash his clothes and bathe his body in water and be clean. Now on the 8th day he is to take 2 male lambs without defect, and yearly all lamb without defect, and 3/10 of an ephah, a fine flour mixed with oil for grain offering, and 1 log of oil. And the priest who pronounces him clean shall present the man to be cleansed, and the aforesaid before the Lord at the doorway of the tent meeting. Then the priest shall take 1 of the male lamb and bring it to the for a guilt offering, and with the log of oil, and the present them as a wave offering before the Lord. Next, He shall slaughter the male lamb in the place where they slaughter the sin offering and the burnt offering at the place of the sanctuary for the guilt offering. Like the sin offering belongs to the priest, it is most high. The priest shall then take some of the blood of the guilt offering, and the priest shall put it on the lobe of the right ear, and the one to be cleansed, and the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. The priest shall also take some of the log oil and pour it into his left palm, and the priest shall then dip his right hand finger into the oil that is in the left palm, and with his fingers sprinkle some of the oil 7 times before the Lord. It's interesting because this is the same or similar ritual that is done to consecrate the priesthood that we saw in chapter 7 and 8 of this book of Leviticus. Okay, now Yeshua again is interesting because you see that the description of how he was going to be a leprous Messiah in Matthew again, chapter 26, verse 6 to 13, at the Passover meal. He says, now when Yeshua was in Bethany at the home of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster veil and very costly perfume, and she poured it on his head as he reclined at the table. But the disciples were indignant when they saw this, and said, why this waste? For his perfume might have been sold for a high price and the money given to the poor. But Yeshua, aware of this, said to them, why do you bother the woman? For she has done a good deed to me. For you always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me. For when she poured his perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for a burial. Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be spoken in of her memory. Now, to close out, Yeshua says in Luke 17, verse 11 to 19, while he was on the way to Jerusalem, he was passing between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, 10 leprous men who stood at a distance met him, and they raised their voices, saying, Yeshua, Master, have mercy on us. When he saw them, he said to them, go and show yourselves to the priests. As they were going, they were cleansed. Now, one of them, when he saw that he had been healed, turned back, glorifying Adonai with a loud voice. And he fell on his face at his feet, giving thanks to him. And he was a Samaritan. Then Yeshua answered and said, were there not 10 who were cleansed? But the 9, where are they? Was no one found who returned to give glory to Adonai, except this foreigner? And he said to him, stand up and go. Your faith has made you well. So, the details of the leprosy and the contamination or the disease, scale disease, or if is a manifestation of what we are hiding inside, or that sin, that moral impurity that we are trying to hide. Yeshua himself gave us the opportunity to be cleansed from that sin. And our action to own up to that is to turn back to his Father, to be thankful that we have the opportunity, that in our transgressions, in our mistakes, that we're able and we're allowed to. The door is open. The door is open by Yeshua himself for us to have access to his Father and to be cleansed from our iniquities. And so, let's not be like that, those 9 that never came back to be thankful for that. Let's be that Samaritan, because even though that Samaritan would have been hated by his fellow Israelites and was shunned by them, especially leaders, he was the only one that was thankful for his cleansing and turned to the Father. So, Thank you for watching. Before we finish, I will repeat the opening joke, and I'll let you be free. It says, why didn't they play cards in the ark? And it says, because Noah was standing on the deck. Have a good week. Shavua Tov and Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Smash that like button and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.